Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we are going week to week, introducing all of you to something new to watch TV, some movies along the way as well. In today's episode, the season finale of Smoke, the Apple TV Plus firefighter, fire investigator, firebug series coming to a conclusion. As usual with these episodes, I'm joined by Darren.
G'day there, Victor. We made it.
We made it to the end. Not that many people paying attention to this series, but we will see. You know what? Sometimes we get a pop on the finale. So if the people were curious to see how it all landed, maybe they will turn out for this particular episode of the show. A little bit of news before we get going. Just the fact that a show that has picked up traction here on the podcast, the Dexter Resurrection, a little slow to start, I have to say, but it seems like audiences are tuning in, turning up, and yeah, we're getting downloads on the old episodes. We're getting downloads on the most recent episodes. So this one seems to have caught some traction. Darren, are you all caught up on Dexter Resurrection?
Yeah, all caught up on Dexter. Yeah, I'm loving it week to week. So fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun on that one for sure. 3 more episodes to go. And of course, we have already begun Alien Resurrection, episode 1 and 2 last week. I was on vacation and it was inconvenient to record. I was just saying to you off mic that I just finally finished putting that commentary together on those first 2 episodes. Darren had watched and diligently, despite having a conflict at the time, and his commentaries in there as well. So expect that episode probably tomorrow. I'm trying to space these episodes out a little bit because then on Wednesday, we will be covering the show, which premieres on Tuesday. So Tuesday night is, in the United States anyway, is the premiere of those episodes. Episode 3 coming this week, and Darren and I will be covering that, and probably expect that episode probably Wednesday night or Thursday morning.
Now, Victor, I'll pick you up. You called it Alien Resurrection. I'm not sure if you've watched that one.
There
recently,
is an Alien Resurrection.
Alien Earth.
Thank you for calling that out. There is an Alien Resurrection, so we will not be watching that movie. I don't necessarily recommend that one unless you're a hardcore Alien completist. But I'm mixing up Dexter Resurrection, of course, with Alien Earth. Dexter Earth, Alien Resurrection. Just confusing everybody as much as possible. And then we will be covering that for the next 6 weeks, 6 more episodes beyond the first 2. Very excited to cover that, and had a lot to say about that first episode and some of the deeper themes there in the show. Although maybe it will be more of an action-oriented show after this initial setup. I guess we'll know soon enough.
Yeah, there's some killer action in that. My God, I'm loving that show.
Yeah, kind of a mix of Alien, the kind of slow burn of Alien with the military action of Alien 2 and or Aliens, I should say, and then I guess maybe interjecting or injecting other of the other films, the other themes in the other films into that later in the season. That's a very strange series of films if I've seen them all. So, and I think Noah Hawley, just like he did with not just Fargo, but all of the Coen brother films, kind of mixing them all together into this stew of Coen themes in the Fargo shows. I think he's going to do a similar thing here with Alien.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to think of the Fargo TV series, but I feel like he actually pulled scenes from other Coen brothers films just
absolutely.
to shove into there.
Yep.
Yeah, which is so cool. If you're across all that, it's just so fun to see those Easter eggs.
Yeah, if you see, if you are a fan of Fargo, but if you're a fan of the Coen brothers in general, you'll definitely get Easter eggs. And by the way, you're already seeing it here with the Alien film, that series, I should say, that there are just images and motifs and just the way characters are styled that make you think of some of the other Alien films beyond just the first and second one. But primarily, I think the frame of the show will very much probably lean into the first and second, which of course are probably the ones that most people have seen. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to bring up. First of all, Terrence Stamp died just today. R.I.P. Terrence Stamp. I'm not a huge Terrence Stamp fan, but in the past year, a few times he's popped up, and I do want to shout out a few Terrence Stamp references here. One is, I just saw this movie for the first time, a very strange film from 1965 called The Collector that I happened to watch because it was in reference to another movie that was coming out that this was similar to, and I can't even remember what it was. But this movie from 1965, directed by William Wyler, who directed a lot of musicals and a lot of women's films, as they were called back in the 1950s, made this film called The Collector about a serial killer who kidnaps girls off the streets, locks them in his basement, and that he basically convinces himself that he is dating these women. And there's an interesting dynamic where the girl he happens to have kidnapped, is trying to ingratiate herself with this guy. And it becomes like a metaphor for how messed up, I guess, interpersonal male-female relationships were in England back in 1965. But a really interesting film called The Collector. And he's very young at this point. So we had not ever seen him this young, because my relationship with Terrence Stamp began as far as being a viewer, was as Zod in the Superman 1 and 2 films, which we discussed here on the podcast recently. And the last thing I want to mention is another thing that he intersected with pop culture later in his career, was in The Limey, the Steven Soderbergh movie, which if you've never seen that is a great sun-drenched California noir. And he's such a great tough guy, this old ancient tough guy who's kicking ass in California. And Soderbergh shooting the film, editing the film. It's one of my favorite jobs Soderbergh has done. And a really interesting story on that film, by the way. The narrative was completely linear. And if you've seen that film, the story is like almost as if it's happening in his own memories. It's a very prismatic way that he edits that film. And that all came in the edit. It was like the story in a straight ahead, straightforward manner was not really working as a film. So he played with the editing, but for two reasons. For one, that the way that they found the movie in the edit, which I always think is very interesting, and for an incredible performance by Terrence Stamp as the tough guy, the tough old guy there looking for his daughter in California. Have you seen any? What's your relationship with Terrence Stamp?
I'd like to rewatch The Limey. I've only seen that once. But yeah, same as you, Zod from Superman. That's what I really remember him by. But the headlines today are because of his role in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Oh, of course,
which, yeah, a very famous Australian film. For some reason, we love that film. I reckon I've only seen it once. Wasn't really my cup of tea, but a very pivotal touchstone in Australian cinema, and he was one of the lead roles there, along with Guy Pearce, I think.
Mm-hmm. Guy Pearce is like a breakthrough for him for sure. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that film, but I remember there was such a big deal about it when it came out. But a lot of talent has come from that film, obviously. And yeah, I don't remember why, but Priscilla was in the headlines just this past week, I think. Maybe it was an anniversary or something. And then, of course, Terrence Stamp dying in the midst of that as well. But yeah, he has a really long career. He still has been working recently. I actually looked at his IMDb recently, still doing TV work every year or so. Really very charismatic, interesting character for sure. Yeah, long career for sure. Okay, second thing I wanted to mention to you, Darren, is weapons. So we have the second weekend of Weapons. As expected, very strong word of mouth. It's holding well. But the reason I wanted to bring this conversation up with you wasn't because of the box office, but they've made an announcement that they are currently negotiating to make a prequel to Weapons. And usually that's kind of a bad cash grab. But given our critique, and we're not going to do any spoilers here in case people who haven't seen it yet, but given my critique of the show, of the film that we just had in last week's episode, I kind of want to see the prequel to Weapons. The one character specifically, I should say, that I want to know the prequel to.
Yes. We can't say anything about that, can we? Right. I've been listening to a couple of interviews with the director, Zach Kreger, and he did say he wrote a chapter for that character, which didn't make the film, which I'm very interested in. And one thing I wanted to bring up with you, that he said he writes his scripts. He read this book by David Lynch about writing scripts with transcendental meditation, which I thought was very interesting.
I think it's called Catching the Whale or something. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. And so that's how he kind of gets his ideas. He gets into this kind of like bubble and just lets the ideas flow and lets the creative process just deliver him this script. So I thought that was pretty cool. And he sounds like a cool guy. And yeah, I'm on board. Oh, I can't wait for whatever he does next.
Okay, third question I had for you. I just previewed this with you earlier today. We got an email from Jed. Hello, Jed. Thank you for the email from the UK. Primarily, he was talking about the Dexter. He made a really interesting observation about the current season of Dexter that might be a reference back to season 1 of that show. I do want to address that point, but I'll address it in the Dexter episode. But at the end, he mentioned that he had just recently seen Weapons, which he thought was a masterpiece. And he also had just seen Bring Her Back, which I think was very good. Also, a big fan of that horror film as well. And he lamented the fact that his girlfriend doesn't watch horror films with him. And he wasn't asking for advice. But the reason this resonated with me is this podcast originally, the Needs Some Introduction, the whole idea of this conceptually, we're so far from this, by the way. But when I started this podcast, the idea would be that you'd be either into a band or into a film director or into a genre of films. And you'd say, like, my kids are not into it. I want to ease them into it. And then I would be like a therapist and say, okay, like, how do we get your kids to get into this thing with you as well? Whether it was a playlist I built or whether it was a mini film festival, and then everybody would interact that way and then come back with their feedback. So that's supposed to be the original plan. Not at all what we do here on the podcast nowadays. Anyway, his email resonated with me because that's kind of what I was intrigued by in the first place with this whole concept. So my question to you, Darren, of course, you go see, I actually just asked my wife about this also. She was not a horror movie fan. I am a horror movie fan. So I've gotten her into to see some of these films with me. And of course, I think you do a similar thing with your wife as well. I don't know if she is also a fan of horror or not. But in general, whether it's horror or not, if you're just trying to get your spouse to participate in something you're into, whether it's a genre of show or genre of film, do you have a technique? Do you have a suggestion for Jed and his girlfriend?
It's very difficult, isn't it? And it's not
Yes.
so much a technique as it's just you have to revolve your life around feeding little tidbits of information. My wife's a fan of actors and actresses, so if there is we went to see Together because she's a fan of Alison Brie, so that was easy to get her into. Weapons, I've showed the teaser, so she's like, that's a really cool teaser, and I don't call it a horror film. It's like, I think this is a thriller with possibly horror elements. But yeah, things like comic book movies, I cannot get her to come to a Marvel movie with me. I had some recent success with Superman because we watched the Christopher Reeve documentary. So she was a fan of Christopher Reeve and she remembered watching Superman as a kid. So that was successful. But yeah, you just have to seed little things here and there and just not overwhelm her with recommendations or with other things. And also you need to be open to watch when she wants to watch some meandering adult drama with romantic elements. You need to be like, yes, sweet, let's watch that. Why not? And just go with their suggestion, and then they might be a little bit more willing to go with your suggestions.
Yeah, I had the same general suggestions that you had in line with some of the things you mentioned. One of them is that you make the point of what are they into? Like, for example, they are interested in an actor. So, for example, the perfect example of that, recently I watched Heretic with my wife. I had already seen it in theaters, but I watched it on HBO Max. She knows Sophie Thatcher. She actually saw Companion with me in a theater, one of the rare times we saw a horror movie together in a theater. She'd like that very much. But it's also because it was kind of almost a subversion of a rom-com. So she thought she liked that aspect of it. She likes Sophie Thatcher from Yellow Jackets. And of course, she also likes Hugh Grant. So the whole Hugh Grant thing, playing a villain, she was definitely intrigued. And then most importantly, it's that she likes these kind of talky, philosophical dramas. So I think find that intersection point, things that this is to you, Jed, that your girlfriend, what type of films does she like? Does she, for example, like Brad Pitt? Then maybe you want to watch Seven. Pretty rough go for step one, but still, like if that is a selling point, then find characters they might be interested in. Or I think about, like you mentioned, Darren, that don't even pitch it as a horror film, right? Like a lot of these films that, if you love watching slashers and she doesn't like watching, I don't think you're going to get her on board with watching slashers, for example. But given the films you're talking about, I think you can make the pitch that this is just, for example, does she like thrillers? Does she like psychological thrillers? Well, a lot of these horror films are basically psychological thrillers. So try to find something that lays over what they're already interested in. And then you can definitely find things. For example, I have a whole list of films in my letterbox that no one categorizes as horror films that I do consider horror films, like films that make you confront the terror of everyday life, which don't necessarily have supernatural elements. I consider those things to be even more terrifying sometimes than traditional horror films. So if she likes dramas that have psychological tension, then you can use that as a gateway and say, oh, you like that film? Well, here's like a horror version of it. And then you can use that as a segue to other films that you may like. If they just don't like being uncomfortable, I mean, it's not even the bloody, because a lot of horror films aren't bloody. If they're just like, I don't like being uncomfortable watching a film, well, then you're probably not going to be able to watch any horror films with them. That's just how it's going to be.
Or maybe book like the luxe recliner seats with the meals and the drinks that come. So
Yes.
that there's other things to latch onto.
I've never enjoyed the eating while watching a movie experience in the theater. And I can't imagine with a horror film, like having people like delivering food to you. While it might, I like to see a film in a movie theater, either to be sucked into the experience without the distractions of being at home, or for the communal experience of people laughing at the same time, jumping at the same time. Like, that's why I go there. If someone's going in, like handing me sodas, asking me to pay for the bill, for my meal while I'm, watching a movie, it's just all a distraction that I could get at home, honestly. So thank you very much. I'll just not do that, but it might work. But some people like it. So
I actually can't stand it. I've been to those a few times and I'm like, nah, no food. I'll have my food and drinks beforehand. Thanks. But my wife likes, if I got free tickets to something. So even if I don't have free tickets, I say, oh, I got these discounted tickets. It's to this movie on this night. So do you want to come with? She's like, great. What a bargain. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it too. And they have date nights, right, on all those programs. Like AMC has a Tuesday night date night, so you get those discount tickets. By the way, I don't like the eating, but in the olden days in Europe, in Portugal, when I would go see a movie, they'd always have an intermission, even like a 2-hour movie, but they had a bar outside. So although I don't like food, I did like bringing a cocktail in at intermission and having a cocktail while I was watching a movie. That I am 100% on board with. I just don't want people walking around delivering food and smelling people's food and hearing it unwrap while I'm trying to watch the movie. No, thank you. No, thank you to any of that.
There should be more movies with an intermission. I'm a massive fan of an intermission to go for a walk around.
You just saw the Brutalist, right? There's an intermission.
The movie. Brutalist, yeah. Well, that was an intermission. That was okay, that's it for tonight. Let's watch the second half tomorrow night.
It was the perfect kind of intermission. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into Mirror Mirror, the season finale. Oh my, I got so many things to say. I thought I was going to have nothing to say about this episode after I watched it, Darren. And then I started taking notes. I have so many things to say all of a sudden. Let's get through the plot quickly and then start breaking down some of the things that happen here. So when the episode kicks off, on the news, we hear about Burke's arson. Dave immediately is worried. Oh my God, I'm going to get blamed for this. Reba says, look, I'm not going to vouch for you. I don't know. For all I know, you walked out in the middle of the night. And he's like, what are you talking about? You know if I left the house or not? And she says, no, she had a sex hangover and couldn't possibly know what had happened the night before. Dave literally has an intoxicating penis.
She had some Valium or something as well.
Yes, there was that too. But I like the sex hangover was partially to blame for this. So I don't think I've ever heard that excuse before.
Good on you, Dave. Well done.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you see what Dave actually looks like at the end of the episode. And of course, after all this, what would you do, Darren? Would you call your lawyer and start lawyering up and say, man, I think things are going to get really bad for me? No, he just walks into work. That's what I would do. He threatens Greg Kinnear as soon as he gets there, says, I didn't do this. And by the way, if I go down, remember, I'll take you down too. And Kinnear has no time for this. He's like saying, you know what? Do your worst, cop killer. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's pretty much his attitude, which of course is everyone's attitude here. They are pretty confident that he has killed Burke. He also apologizes to Michelle. He still does not onto her that she is the culprit here. And he says, I didn't do this. And I know you had a relationship with him, but really, I didn't do this. She has a terrible poker face here in interactions with him. And earlier, she had shown up at the crime scene itself and is getting interviewed by this investigator. And she just looks so guilty this whole entire time.
Full
What did
on,
you
and
think?
they
Yeah.
just introduce a brand new character, this
Yep.
badass female investigator in the last episode, and she does a huge job. Yeah, so guilty, didn't she? It just puts you in that body of hers that she's just Calderon is just like, how do you act when you're guilty as hell?
Yep.
Everybody, and as I think there's a line like, as soon as they figure out that those two are an item, then everybody is going to start looking at her.
Right. Yeah. And then while she's there at that scene, this is before she runs Dave back at the office, she notices that, of course, the neighbor has a security camera. So she calls up her brother. She says, "You know what? I know you're not just a DJ. I know you don't just go to cockfights. I know you can break it. I know you can break into people's homes too. And I need you to go in there and get this video footage." So he's on his way to, I guess he somehow figures out the people who live here, reaches out to them, and they have a good excuse. I should mention the fact that, speaking of how Calderon has, not only this metaphorically, but literally how her actions have had all these significant consequences. And it makes her really parallels her with some of the things that Dave has done in the past more and more so. When you think about the fact that it's her fire that she set that then leads to this small brush fire, relatively small brush fire around the house, which now leads to this, these embers floating into this abandoned mill, or I guess it's operational because there's all this dust in the air. And of course, dust in these mills can easily catch fire. That's why you're supposed to suck all the, these people are not code to code with their mill for sure. But the mill explodes with this fire. So then you have this massive fire that is spreading all over the mountainside, right above the city. You can see it right from downtown, this fictional city they live in, of course. And so it's pretty amazing fire that has started, but it's all started because of Michelle's initial fire. So in a way, she's become a serial arsonist of her own.
And what an incredibly cinematic
Yeah.
shot
Mm-hmm.
of this ember floating through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just that made the episode for me. That was so stunning. And also just the destructive power of fire and how it can get out of control so fast. And you've got nothing. You cannot do anything to fix it. And even you need like almost an act of God as the rain comes down to extinguish it.
Exactly. And they literally, have that. Speaking of some of the contrivances in the plot, which we'll get into. And I'm not saying there's a criticism. I'm saying as maybe textual to this whole entire project. But yeah, it's pretty. And just some beautiful sequences. Eventually, they'll be driving through the fire. That sequence was incredibly good. The scenes where they're fighting each other, and you could easily see that they were like green screened and the fire wasn't actually there. But apparently, some of the scenes where they were like walking through the fire, I was just reading an article about it, that they had fire piped in, like literally like fire blowing in the background. So some of those scenes were practical, but some of them you could tell are, definitely the ones that seemed the most dangerous were probably just green screened, and they were a little, not as strong as everything else. But some of the other stuff, like you said, like the mill exploding and some of the fire sequences, or just the fire, them driving into the mountain with the fire burning, the smoke in the distance, really amazing footage.
It's so frightening. I mean, every summer in Australia, we have massive bushfires, and there's always footage that someone's streamed or someone's put up on social media of a fire truck in the middle of a giant fire, and they're just trying to find the exit. It feels like they know what they're doing, but it's just absolute chaos all around them. And every time I see that vision, I'm just so frightened by how do you get yourself into that, and how do you get yourself out of it? Oh my God.
It's almost like you don't even. I just watched again that firefighter film based on a true story, like a really Only the Brave with Josh Brolin from the director of F1. It's available on Amazon Prime if anybody hasn't seen that, and that is incredible. Just as you would expect, the director of Top Gun Maverick and F1 being like, what is the fire footage like in that? It's extraordinary, but it's terrifying when you see this based on an actual fire where some of these firefighters died, that you see how they're like on another mountaintop and then the wind changes direction and they're like, we need to move now. And you're like, why are they moving now? They're so far ahead. But the wood is so dry and the wind just changes. And then all of a sudden those embers fall over and they are like instantaneously driving through this forest that is suddenly entirely engulfed in flames, and it's really terrifying.
It is terrifying. The wind is the enemy, isn't it? And it's like,
Absolutely.
I thought Dave was smart. He's like, well, coming up behind the fire. Yeah. And I was like, okay. But then he just kept going into it.
He kept going. That's the problem. He's like racing the fire by the time of the end of it. So yeah, before then though, by the way, so this is how I've been watching this show, so much of it, Darren. I didn't realize I was so certain that, of course, this is a 1-season show, right? How can you make this story the real life story? Once again, maybe the fact that this is based on a real life story, I was leaning into that too much. How did they, plan to draw this out? But I just found out in an interview that Lehane says that they pitched this as a 3-season arc, 3 seasons.
Interesting.
And speaking to the fact that, there are definitely some leftover threads here. One of them is before they drive behind the fire, etc. Everything we just outlined there. They are actually called in, Calderon and Dave are called in to investigate a fire, a very high-tech fire in a lab. So, of course, this is completely unexplored, but definitely that is intriguing, that this idea that someone could set this fire and be like in another continent for all they knew. So a very high-tech version of, and very depersonalized version of the arson that Dave probably wouldn't, Dave likes literally having his fingerprints on these fires, not the type of fire he would set. But you can imagine that there could be an investigation around this high-tech arsonist as part of season 2 of a show, because for them to introduce this arsonist and then we'll never bring him up again for the rest of the show, that obviously is a thread that would be explored in the next season.
I was very confused with that scene. That was right. It was Calderon and Dave just doing their job again and not talking about the current situation. I was like, what's happening here?
Quite a few. I have a few things, like 3 or 4 things that are obviously intended to be threads that would continue through another season of the show. And that is probably the most glaring one. They head behind the fire. They have this very contentious conversation. Once again, having this conversation where Calderon's like, I know exactly what you're about. I know exactly what you did. And Dave's like, you don't have proof of anything. That all sounds circumstantial. You're wrong about me. And they're going back and forth. But then he starts driving right into the fire. And now at that point, she knows that he's not even pretending to be hiding his intentions anymore. And then he drives right into a tree and catapults Calderon by unclipping her seatbelt right out the window, like one of those watermelons in one of those car crash videos you've watched in the past. She goes flying right through the windshield. And Darren, how believable is this? She lands like a superhero. She lands on her feet, gun drawn. What is going on? And Dave is, terrified. And boy, he's also very aroused by all of this. This is his dream coming true. This indestructible firewoman coming at him in the middle of the fire.
Her gun wasn't drawn just yet. First of all, you needed a big slow motion shot of her tying her hair up.
Of course. Before she draws her gun, she's got to put her ponytail up.
I think that's the enduring image of this finale for me. My goodness, I've been replaying that in my head over and over again, just like Dave.
She's like part cat here. She just pops right out of the car.
Epic. This whole scene is just so epic. And then when she gets him out of the car, and when she's beating him up, and when she's got the gun in his mouth, I mean, come on. This is just he wanted to have sex in a burning building. He almost gets it, doesn't he?
You know that Dave was lightheaded. He had such a raging erection at this moment. he likes to be aroused in these scenes. This is very much get out of the car, Dave. And he's like, I'm gonna need a minute.
And also, it felt like Calderon was in it too. I mean, she feels
she's playing the role when she puts the gun in his mouth, for sure. Yeah.
Wow. What did you think of all this?
Oh, this is, we got to talk about what this might mean for the context of the show when we know for fact that so much of what we've seen, Dave's own self-perception is so much this own mythology of his. You cannot, I know I've been beating this this hobby horse this whole entire season. But so much of this is preposterous. It's such a fantasy that he's having. You think about the relationship he has with Reba, for example, this abusive, like humiliation thing. Like he has everything. This is so written by. This is really like right out of Dave's fantasy, basically, is my point. And it's so silly. And it's hard to take the show seriously, by the way, because of some of these choices. But this was really, I mean, I couldn't take this seriously at all.
I tend to agree, but I just love how they swing for the fences, and it was just the music that was playing. I think I just read an interview where the writer Dennis Lehane he had that choice of music as he was writing the scene, and the scene had to match with this music. So it's just incredible. I just went with it. It's just so.
What song was he? What song was it? Yeah, there was like it was like a soft. Not, Dave loves like that soft rock from the 70s. It was like a soft rock song. Yeah, I can't remember. It was inappropriate. It seemed not apropos for the moment. But now I got to remember what song that was.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. You might have to insert it somewhere in the.
It wasn't Tool
notes. But yeah, my God, and just the gun in his mouth and the rain that comes down that drenches it. It almost and it harks back to his other hero moment when he doused the other firebug in fire extinguisher. And I mean, it was so many sexual connotations in these climactic scenes. He's just what a great guy. I wish I could live like Dave, that you could just craft these things in your everyday life that make you into just this sexual hero.
Yeah, and that is he definitely, I mean, that's something that is we see on screen here, that he's aroused at one point as well. And we'll get into the real life story here at the end of this particular recap episode. But that is not even subtextual. It is overtly the text of the book written by the real life analog, that in the novelization, that the arsonist, the firefighter slash investigator slash perpetrator, was the reason he set the fires was because it was his sexual release was through the fire. So here we have it, illustrated here in this series. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Dave is having that's like his greatest fear, that he's going to be caught for doing these things, and his greatest sexual fantasy happening at the exact same time there in that moment.
Interesting. So yeah, I was going to ask you how it intersects with the real life podcast and the supposed real life story, but and that's one of the ways, is it?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, if it intersects with anything, the story we're seeing here, not fully but partially, has a lot of overlap with the book that this arsonist wrote. So that's another thing that is not. I mean, it's a little confusing how they've chosen to use it here, but I have more questions, so I'm kind of reticent to answer the question. But maybe I'll just put the facts on the table, and then you tell me what you think all of that means when we get to the end. So they get back to, they get saved by rain, an act of God. The rain comes, puts out the fire. They walk back because, of course, the car has been destroyed. Not only on the initial impact, but then he freaks out, reverses it, and smashes the car again. So now it's completely debilitated. They get home. They get back to the police department. I've never seen a police department like this. It's pretty funny. There's like hundreds of police officers all there, beating Dave up as he gets walked back. He does his perp walk back. And he is, then she is convinced that he wants to confess to me. I got to get into his head. So she goes and picks the glass out of her back and gets cleaned up. And she gets visited by the ghost of Burke past. And he warns her that, you know what, eventually they're going to start asking questions. This is not going to line up. And they're never going to stop looking. They never stop looking for a cop killer. So she knows that would be bad for her. And this is another thing, like I mentioned, that there's definitely these dangling plot threads. This is definitely something that's left for season 2, because why even have this? It could be the subtext that, I don't know if she's going to get away with this, but to overtly have this moment where she acknowledges the fact that this is not going to go well for her. That really sets up, like, what is that investigation going to look like? Does she have to frame Dave in the next season? or is there a separate investigation? Is she on the run at some point? All of this would be, I think, developed in season 2.
That was such a good scene.
Yeah.
It did have remind me of Dexter with his dad always haunting
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
But the way Rafe Spall just comes in and his final scene of the series is to just haunt her and to sow all this doubt in her, which you know is there. And she's just been in a car crash and she's trying to pull herself together, trying to do her hair again, to get ready to interview Dave. And she's just like, how can she get out? She can't get out of this crime.
Right. She can't even walk away from it. She's like so central to the whole thing at this point. And, she questions him and she thinks she's getting to him. She is at times, but he's got his story down. And this is all very circumstantial. It's actually maybe the most intriguing aspect of even the true life story is, can you make a solid case, or is this all in the end too circumstantial? So, and he's very cocky about it because he knows that he has thought this out and he's been down this road and he knows how hard it probably is to make one of these cases. So all of this kind of is working in his way for him. And then thank goodness, we were making fun of Ezra. Why is he still on the case? Thank goodness that Ezra is still on the case. He remembers, hey, remember that car accident that he was in a few episodes back? He was coming back from a fire. Let's go and take that car apart. And they find his arsonist fatigues, his outfits, his disguise here. And that makes something go click inside of Dave's head. And he then looks in the mirror and we see again the mirror reveal. Dave is a little bit more schlubby, a little more bald than he thinks himself to be. What do you think about this mirror reveal?
The mirror. Yeah. I've got so much to say about the mirror, but it's so good that Ezra, he gets asked to stand down again by this new investigator that they had some kind of tryst behind a building, which they both are trying to forget. But his friend, Anna Chomsky, is still keeping him involved, and he comes up with a great piece of evidence. And this uniform or this costume kind of breaks Dave down and makes him see himself in the mirror for one of the first times in the series. So good. I just loved seeing him. I just wanted to see him even fatter, even balder, even ugly, because he wasn't that bad. Seriously, he wasn't that bad. But maybe that's the point. But yeah, so good. Dave was doing a great job. And I feel like this mirror can also be reflected in Calderon as well.
Sure.
I feel like because we see plenty of scenes when she's by herself, and you go back to that scene that you loved and hated in the sex dungeon where she shot the guy twice in the groin. I feel like the show is also seeing her in like an expanded light, like a heroine kind of light as well. It's not just Dave; it's about all of us of who we see in the mirror. I'm not sure if I'm trying to explain this very well, but what we see in the mirror is different to how the world sees us, and I think she sees herself as a bit more of a hero than she is.
Well, I mean, I think you're hitting on something really central there. Lehane says that the real villain in this story, in his estimation, is the mythology of the hero, of the need of being a hero. And another thing he said, another quote in one of the interviews he gave, was saying that the people by the end of the show, the people who are pursuing Dave are as twisted as he is. And I don't think they just mean that Calderon did something bad, but the idea that they are so fixated on accomplishing this, of catching Dave, that they are willing to do anything to earn achieve that reward or capture him, to the extent like to their detriment, in the same way that like Dave, for example, so desperate to be a hero that he's just like, well, I need to be a hero. I need to feel that persona, to be that thing, that people see me that way, that I have to set the fires myself, right? So it is so twisted at that point, but that mythology of being the hero is so toxic in this particular case. And I think what you're mentioning there is, it is that self-perception. I need to see myself this way, even if I have to manufacture the disaster so that it can be achieved. I think that is the theme of the series.
Yeah, and you could extend it to other characters as
Sure.
well, like Calderon's brother. As you said, he's a DJ, he's a drug dealer, he can sort out the security camera footage. He can do all this because he sees himself that way. And I think other characters as well, like this investigator that was introduced in this episode, she saw herself as a tough nut, and she did this performative thing to stand Ezra down at the scene, and it's her scene. She can find the cop killer. Everyone can see themselves as the hero and build themselves up in their mind to give them the confidence to do these jobs.
Yeah, speaking of a couple of things that you're bringing up there as well, just to close the circle on some of these, another thing that definitely would be left over in another season, I very highly I doubt we'll see another season of the show, but something that would tie into that or is left dangling is, of course, the brother himself cleaning up the footage, understanding the weight of what he's seeing there, and keeping a copy of it so that he can blackmail his sister at some point in the future. We also see her mother's face, by the way, the younger version of her mother's face. We still have not seen the present day mother, but we do see in that flashback to the fire that she flashes back to her. And of course, shocking to see this young woman be her mother. And then, of course, you think to yourself, wait a second, her mom's been, this is 20 years ago. Her mom was a young person at the time, right? So it's this, seeing suddenly her mom approximately the same age as Julie Smollett is in this role, the Calderon character, I guess, like in her early 30s. So, so another thing that we see here, and tying back to all of these damaged characters, all their damaged relationships with their parents and siblings. And yeah, that definitely showing parallels between Calderon specifically now that Dave across the table from her, he still doesn't seem to. I think he honestly hasn't suspected her of this killing of Burke. Maybe she's on the suspect list, but I don't think he would have assumed that would be the case. But he knows for sure that he did not commit the crime himself. But it's interesting to see them on the other sides of the table, because now all of a sudden Calderon has set a fire, has led to a catastrophic fire. Who knows the amount of damage that has cost to cover up this murder of Burke, which was accidental. But it's starting to be that in her obsession and in even some of her actions, she's not that dissimilar from Dave anymore.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, and in that interrogation scene, she can see some of her traits very clearly that Dave is showing. Yeah, that USB drive and downloading the images from the hard drive onto his drive. There's no reason to do that apart from setting up a season 2. Yeah, I don't need to see the season 2 of this. I think this finale was batshit crazy, and I'm completely happy with this and to be it for this show. But if they do a second season, I'll watch for sure. But apart from that scene earlier on investigating this random fire and the hard drive, and you're right, the face of the mother. So the mother the mother's yet to come back into the picture, so we could possibly see that in the future, but I don't need to. I think it finished fantastically.
Yeah, I think I would presume if we saw a season 2, I don't expect that to happen, but if we saw a season 2, she's going to reconcile with her mom. She's going to realize she's probably more like her mom than she wants to acknowledge. She'll have to grapple with all of that. There'll be some kind of investigation. She'll be dodging that. There'll be these charges against Dave. He will either escape from not escape physically, but he'll either not get charged with these crimes, or the case will drag on. He might still keep his job. They'll be investigating these other things. There'll be tension around all of that, of course, while the case drags out. So all of that would continue in season 2, I presume. But I don't think it's going to happen. It's funny to think too, because first of all, the ratings haven't been great on this show, but second of all, it's the fact that Apple for a long period of time would just renew their shows because they didn't really have hits. But now Apple has like a handful of like actual hit shows. I don't think they're just going to greenlight anything that has just because they need content on the platform. So I think this is probably going to fall by the wayside. But I think overall, It could have been tighter. And I think that there's probably more reveals. My gut instinct is that over the course of season 2 and season 3, there will be more shoes to drop. Like we are perhaps seeing some of the things we've seen here were more from Dave's perspective, and we'll see a more realistic version of the people around him. Because, for example, one thing I want to shout out here is that, we do see that, just driving the point home that his current wife is packing up her bags, and we see all the pictures. The son's like, what do you want to do with these? It's all the pictures of Dave. And she's like, oh, just put them in this box. And then we see that Dave is, of course, literally, that's not just his impression of himself in the mirror. That is literally what he actually looks like. But I don't know. He still gets some pretty hot babes, I got to say. So I do wonder if a lot of that is just his own self-perception.
I do think that's his projection of his partners, or also it could be his partner's projection of themselves, right?
True.
I mean, she's a librarian, but we see her as quite a glamorous librarian who's all about it, goes to the gym and has got everything under control. And his other ex-wife, she sees herself as married to a very well-off guy, and they've got a very beautiful house, and she sees herself as glamorous and can have affairs whenever she wants. So yeah, like I say, this theme of the mirror can go throughout all the characters.
I did laugh out loud while I was watching the show, just cracked myself up thinking about it when we saw what he actually looked like. And I suddenly was like, are we going to get like a flashback where we see him in all these different contexts, but in the fat suit? And I suddenly imagined him dancing in the thong in the fat suit. And I'm like, oh, I want to see that. I want to see that.
That's an opportunity lost.
So where do I want to go next? So yeah, I think we touched on I had some notes here about where they could go to season 2. I don't think we're going to see that, but I think we touched on everything. The brother having the flash drive, using it to blackmail her into accepting the mom, her relationship with her mom, the investigations, the parallel investigations, etc. I think that's pretty much what we would see if we got a season 2. I can't imagine this going on for third season, to be honest. But that was the plan originally. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll see another one. Or honestly, I have to say, not even unfortunately, if this came back for another season, Apple's got a lot of money and they just said here, and maybe that's a question I'll have for you. Would you even bother watching a season 2? I honestly don't think I would come back for a season 2.
Oh, look, I'm a massive fan of Journey Smollett. I would tune in just for her. I think she's fantastic. She was great. If there was another slow-mo shot of her putting her hair up, I mean, that's it. I'm down.
Okay. I say that I would not. I would definitely sample it. I don't know if I would stick around for a whole season, but I would try the first couple episodes just to see if they were able to expand the story. All right. Let me wrap this up by talking about this real life character. This guy, I've read a few articles on him. There's a few documentaries out there as well. There's an HBO movie. I heard it's not that good, but stars Ray Liotta in this role from like the mid 90s, I think it was. So anyway, there's a lot of content out there if you want to track it down on your own. But I was more interested in understanding the actual motivation of the arsonist. And because he's denied that he is the arsonist, we really don't have a real psychological insight, so I had to read quite a few different things just to get some details that made sense other than like just the facts of the case. But here's what I came up with. And obviously do your own investigation beyond here if you're curious. This guy's name was John Leonard Orr, O-R-R. These fires took place in California, not in Orrington. So don't look on the map for Orrington. You're not going to find it. There is an Orrington, Maine, by the way, but that's not where they are. They're in Orrington, the state of Orrington. So whatever that means. But it is on the West Coast. The original story, I should say. It is in California, right around Los Angeles. So this guy, his backstory is that when he was 16, he had a bad relationship with his parents. His parents divorced. He became a loner. He joined the military when he was 18 years old. He eventually was honorably discharged. Now, here's where things start intersecting with the story. Oh, he married a childhood sweetheart. His first wife had 2 daughters, which we never saw the first wife in this storyline. And as far as we know, he doesn't have any biological children, not the version of this character we saw in the show. But the true life person did have these children from his first marriage, 2 daughters, which he seemed to be alienated from later in life. Tried to join the police department. He was found psychologically unfit due to his violent tendencies. So that is true. by the way. He tried to join the fire department after that. And originally he was accepted and then rejected. So that might tell you something as well. He eventually joined a smaller fire department in a secondary role. But over time, he started to climb the ranks, became a firefighter, and eventually a fire investigator. And part of the reason he became this well-known fire investigator is because he solved a fire that was proven to be an arson at a hardware store where a grandmother and a grandchild died in the fire. And it was one of the first fires from a decade-long arsonist who would set pillows on fire. So they actually, nowadays, pillows are non-flammable for this reason, because they used to be very easy to start a fire in like a pile of pillows. And like this version of the story here, starting it in the chips, he had a homemade incendiary device, very much like described here, a cigarette the match head of a cigarette wrapped in paper with a little bit of gunpowder in it, I think it was, a coin, elastic band to weigh it down, etc. So very much like we saw here in the show, but starting with pillows and then mattresses eventually. And they call him like the pillow arsonist or pillow something. All that is to say that he was, investigated this case, and it turned out years later he was actually the arsonist himself.
Wow, full on. Okay, cool. So this story's been around a while.
Yes, this is like in the 80s. This whole thing. So this ended. His arsons ended in the early to mid 90s, and so all of this has been brought up to contemporary times.
Did he get caught finally?
Yeah, so that's the question. So then eventually, so this goes on for almost a decade, very similar to what we saw here. There were brush fires simultaneous to these fires set in these convenience stores and in hardware stores, pillow fires mostly, but being set in these stores, small shops, and as a distraction. So they didn't call them the D&E, but a similar pattern of, wildfires, etc. Next thing that intersects a lot with the story here is over the course of like this 10-year period, he would go to these fire investigator conferences, and there would be fires that would spread around. And one of this investigator in Sacramento had a theory that these are LA firefighters or fire investigators who are setting these fires because we have this pattern. And he came up with a short list of people that attended these multiple different events, and this guy was on the list. It wasn't just 3 people like in the story here. It was actually 10 people that they had that fit this pattern, and they had an incendiary device that had not lit, and they had a thumbprint, but they could not match it. They went secretly and got permission from the state to go into the records of the firefighters to match their fingerprints, and they could not match the fingerprint. So at this point, other things have happened as well. He was on a short list of like 2 or 3 people who were suspected of being this arsonist, but they couldn't prove it. And he did not know he was being investigated, by the way. They put tracking devices in his car. He had 2 tracking devices. This is kind of like what happens in the show. They put a tracking device like inside his dashboard and another one in the car. And he was driving too recklessly or something. The tracking device flew off the car like it does in the show here. And he actually went to the police department and says, someone put a bomb in my car. And the police department is like, they found out, they're like, no, we're tracking his movements. We think he's an arsonist. By the way, so not accelerated into a 2-week period. This was happening for years, and they were tracking his movements, and they would find that the car oftentimes was within a very short distance of fires being set. But he was smart. He didn't know he was being tracked, but he still would never bring the car right to the destination. But he was always close, always like within half a mile. So I guess he didn't want to like park his car in the parking lot. So he would park it further away, like a walking distance away. But it was always nearby. And he was always like the first person on the scene, right? Because his car was always like within 3/4 of a mile, which was always incredibly suspicious. So they're tracking his movements. They're building this case. They got no hard evidence. And then they come up with new fingerprinting technology, and all the firefighters have been re-fingerprinted. And now they find a matching fingerprint, right? So now they have a fingerprint. Now they go arrest him. And when they arrest him, they find this 100,000 word novel that he's been working on, which is basically a confession of his crimes.
Brilliant.
And so it's not that he's trying to sell the book. He did try to sell the book, but he used an alias, he used an agent, so it wasn't so like everybody knew it. It wasn't until they really arrested him and took his possessions into custody that they found this. And in that book, it outlines all the fires he set, basically, and the character in there is sexually aroused by setting the fires. So there's like
there we go.
Sexual content about him, and his teenage daughter now, for years she this is another article you can read where she's being interviewed, and for years she defended him, and then she read the manuscript, which has never been published, by the way, but she read the manuscript and she was just disgusted by, like, is this really what was happening in my dad's head? He, however, claims that he did admit eventually to having set some of the fires, but he says, I never set any of the store fires that actually killed people. He did confess to some of the brush fires. I guess they had him dead to rights on some of that. And they talked about how after his arrest, the number of brush fires in around Los Angeles reduced by 98%. It's insane.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the story. That's the story.
And we can't...
a very brief story but there's a lot more. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
We can't read this book of his.
Yeah, I was actually looking to see. I guess you can't legally, you can't make money from committing crimes. Although I guess, you could do it if you gave the money to the victims or something. But as far as I can tell, and maybe I'm wrong about this, by the way, I didn't do that much research, and a lot of the articles I read are pretty old. So maybe it has been published in some form, but as far as I know, it's not something you can read. There's no Calderon character, by the way. There's no female investigator that he's lusting after in his version of the book. But a lot of what happens in the book is what we see in this show. This is part of the reason, as I was doing my investigation, after I had already had this theory that this might be framed that way because I knew there was a novel. But then as I actually read about the content of the novel, like when he had the erection, when he catches Freddie, I'm like, oh my God, this has to be like his version of the book, right? It's coming right out of the book at this point, right? But yeah, so there's definitely things that they're borrowing from his biography. There's things they're borrowing directly from the novel that he wrote. But I don't think you can read the whole novel. And for sure, the one thing I did investigate is that there is no female cop who's hot on his heels in the novel that he wrote. So that's totally fabricated for this particular version of the story.
Incredible. Just the fact that he was responsible for, what did you say, 98% of the brush fires that were going on.
So many of these brush fires were all caused by him. Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty crazy.
That's his job, right? It's like when you see someone like Epstein or Cosby, like that's their job. Their job is to commit these crimes. That's what they think about every moment of every day.
It's full time, right? It's all they do. Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty insane. 2,000 fires so I think I increased that but that's still a lot. It's like a daily occurrence for. That's pretty. It is a daily occurrence. We're talking about a 7-year period where he said 2,000 fires. That is almost every day. That's an insane amount of fires.
That's it. Yeah, it's like a drug addict. You need your drug every day. Got to get it.
Yeah. When that's your sexual substitute, I guess you got to do what you got to do. This is little blue pill, right? Correlating it right back to the show. All right, Darren. So we are done with this show. We'll see if anyone cares.
We're done with this show. No one cares, apparently.
Who cares?
Someone cares.
The 7 of you out there who are still listening at this point.
It's a bloody good show. If anyone's listening and that hasn't watched it, it is really worthwhile watching. It's one of my favorite shows that I've watched recently. It's so fun and so cinematic.
And something that everybody is watching for sure is Alien Earth. And so expect in the next day or two, I'll share this with you right away, right after this meeting, Darren, the episode we put together for episode 1 and 2. I recorded it over the course of like a week. It took me to get around to it, and Darren's feedback as well. And I'll drop that probably tomorrow. And then on Wednesday night or Thursday morning, expect to have our opinion of the 3rd episode of Alien Earth. And of course, later in the week, still covering Dexter Resurrection as well. All right, Darren, thank you.
That's awesome.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Victor. All right, let's talk over each other just at the end. Cheers, mate.